We're here for another episode of EV Obsession. We had a very eventful weekend because we decided to make massive changes to our site architecture, our installation, our deep installation of the site, our theme, and everything went really well except for a few things that we had some trouble with. Some
Everything
bugs.
went great except for the stuff that didn't.
Yeah, the stuff that we absolutely were not concerned about, thinking that it would go smooth as day. Is that a phrase? Probably not.
No.
It's been a long weekend.
It's been a long weekend, but
But it
EV
looks good
Obsession is
now.
back.
Yeah, the
Looks
site
good
is looking
now.
good and EV Obsession is here. So let's jump into some stories.
That's right.
Do you have any extra
I don't know.
self-deprecating?
I feel like we've aged like 500 years since Friday afternoon, since the last one of these.
Yeah.
So let's just go see what happens next.
All right, let's go. Here is with our new desktop site.
Ooh, it's so fancy and blue.
One of the stories I somehow wrote on Saturday in the middle of all this was about the first electric vertical takeoff and landing flight in Florida, which super excited about because I think it's a fun technology as much as I sort of like downplay its potential. And it was right here in Tampa, Florida, near me, and I didn't even know about it. If I had known, I would have gone over there for this kind of photo op. But it's a German company, Volocopter, and it's also, so they did a flight from Tampa International Airport and around in collaboration with Tampa International Airport and the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. So it was the first flight of theirs in the US, but it's also the first electric vertical takeoff and landing flight at a major US airport. So that was interesting because, there's been a number of these flights around the US, test flights, but I guess none from a major US airport. So this is impressive. I'm not going to say it's my favorite design, but it's an interesting one. It's got a lot of rotors for kind of backup situation, for safety, and for supposedly, apparently other reasons as well. This company is based in Germany, but it's got a lot of backing from major money areas of the world. So yeah, it's interesting development there. What are your thoughts, Joe Boris?
Thank you, Zachary Shahan. I really like this. I think I agree with you. It's a weird looking sort of vehicle, but I do think it has some value there. It's a 2-passenger vehicle. It does make use of battery swaps. So you're looking at this going, man, how's this going to work? They're going to fly it somewhere. Then they're going to have to deal with, plugging it in and charging it. The idea that you can pull the batteries out, throw them on a cart, get that cart back in to charge and roll out with some brand new ones, kind of the Gogoro model, or the, if you're on a job site, you've got the Milwaukee or the Ryobi tool model where you can hot swap these batteries relatively quickly. I think that's the way to go for a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to light aviation, ultralight aviation. So it's good to see it in practice. These pictures here, obviously from the Volvo Experience Center in Germany rather than Tampa. But yeah, I think this is a really neat thing. It was cool to see it happen. And we're going to start seeing a lot more of this stuff. Similar to the way that electric vehicles and EV manufacturing seems to have opened the door for a number of startups in the on-road sector. I think you're going to see a lot of that happening in aviation, in maritime nautical applications as well. There's just going to be a lot of startups coming out, and it's good to see some of them getting to that next step.
Yeah, this is the only photo from Tampa that really shows that. I'm not really sure why they don't have better photos of the flight and the event, but yep. So that's that. So also recently, I guess about a week ago, Charlie Munger was on a podcast. And if you're not familiar, sort of, I think one of the biggest legends in the investment world is Warren Buffett. Charlie Munger is his right-hand man. And not everybody agrees with them on everything, of course, but they're like, it's like you always listen to what they have to say. And they made a bet on BYD in 2008, I think it was. Charlie Munger met with the CEO, founder, chairman of BYD, and was deeply impressed with him. Wang Chuanfu, who I've interviewed, and Kyle Field has also interviewed for Clean Technica. Tremendous, born and raised in extreme poverty, on Chinese like rice farms, and just made himself into one of the richest people in the world with great technical innovation and skill, and clearly also a good business mind. But Munger's always been deeply impressed with him, and he says that they're way ahead of Tesla in China. It's almost ridiculous, he said earlier this year. He said on the podcast recently, he can do things you can't. He's a fanatic that knows how to actually make things with his hands. He's closer to ground zero. In other words, the guy at BYD is better at actually making things than Elon is. I consider that trash talk, especially from a like 90-year-old white guy. But I think that's some good little trash talk there. He highlighted that they made a ton of money on BYD, investing in BYD, which they have been selling the stock, some of it lately. But yeah, he could have made more. Clean Technica commenters noted if they invested in Tesla instead of BYD, but that doesn't really come up in his podcast discussion. He also says here the guy was a genius. He had a PhD in engineering. He could look at someone's part in the morning, and in the afternoon he could make it. I've never seen anybody like that. He can do anything. He's a natural engineer and a get it done type production executive, and that's a big talent to have in one place. Might remind you of what a lot of people say about someone else, but his argument is Wang Chuanfu is unparalleled, unmatched in that regard compared to you know who. So that's what I wrote about, because I found it quite interesting. Two titans of the EV world, from the perspective of a famous investor. What are your thoughts on this, Joe? I'm gonna just mute and take a nap while it's gonna be a while, I feel like.
No, I feel like this is going to be pretty quick. I kind of agree with, obviously I've never met the BYD guy, so I can't speak to that. But I think that there is a intentionally inflated sense of Elon's engineering and manufacturing contributions. I think what Elon contributes, which is hugely significant, I think is a little bit more intangible than that. But at the end of the day, this is a story that the ending has yet to be written, right? Because we are looking at, even if you look at that 672 or $627 billion valuation, that's a lot less than it was when we were writing about this 4 years ago and Tesla was at $1 trillion valuation, or 3 years ago and Tesla was at $1 trillion valuation. Meanwhile, I don't know that BYD has lost 40% of its market cap in the same time, despite growing and growing and growing. So I think that, again, this is a story whose conclusion has yet to be seen. I don't know that it's a given that the BYD investment historically will be worse than the Tesla investment. I mean, obviously, if he had sold at if he had gotten in at 200 million and sold at 1.2 trillion or whatever it was, obviously he would have made that. But again, we still don't know how this was going to play out. I'm not convinced that Tesla has the right approach here. Maybe they do. I was talking earlier today with the Accelerate Auto guys. KJ Gimbel's a good dude, and we were talking about Cybertruck and some of the challenges surrounding that. But even he was saying, he believes the Cybertruck's going to be a huge success. He's one of these guys that believes, yeah, there's 2 million orders, maybe 1 million of those will get sold. They're going to be rivaling Ford F-Series sales. This is going to be a mass appeal vehicle. Again, all this stuff might be true. It just, for me, it doesn't seem right. I think BYD's approach to have a number of vehicles, to have a number of platforms, and not focus quite so much on the commoditization of transportation, which seems to be Tesla's underlying MO, I think is the right approach. And I think if I was looking 10 years out, if I'm looking at, what are we going to be talking about on our Clean Technica 25th anniversary, which, by the way, will probably be the next time we do a major site redesign. I think BYD is going to be in better shape.
Yeah, so I was just about to open something when you stopped talking, so I got thrown off. But yeah, so I think what impresses me, like when it was the BYD E6, the car was not impressive. It was like it was limited in severe ways that made it not fun or interesting to drive, and sort of like ruined the benefits of EVs at the same time that the Model S was like blowing people's minds. So I was like, I don't know what this if this guy's got the right idea. When they came out with the Chin and the Tang and had more fun, popular EVs coming out, that's around when when I interviewed him, and the question we had been giving them repeatedly, and I gave him directly, was, "Are you going to bring? When are you going to bring these to the U.S.? Are you bringing these to the U.S.?" And he sort of like he smiled. He gave a kind of smile, like, "Oh yeah, we've been thinking about it for a while. We're looking at it." But through a translator, so it's hard through a translator to really read someone. But he did have a funny little smile about it, so it was something they were thinking about. But that was like, okay, they got better. They still weren't like mind blowing. They were really popular in China, the Chin and the Tang, but they were like, they didn't blow my mind with the quality or innovation of them. And just as the years have gone on, their vehicles just get better and better, and they're now like really really attractive. Like they're up there at the top tier BYD vehicles for what you would consider the best options on the market. So I don't know how much is him or how much is people he's hired, but he's clearly done a magnificent job scaling up the company and improving the lineup. With Elon, I'm always I've seen a lot of great engineers who are like, Elon is a ridiculously good engineer. In all of my DMs with him, like that was one of the things he kept going back to, was like that he saw himself more than anything as an engineer. It was thanks to although he always would qualify like his dad was a horrible person, he says thanks to his dad, he taught him like engineering stuff, like from a very early age, like really core stuff with engineering was always teaching him. So it's always what a lot of people have highlighted as his best skills. But then other people see him more like Steve Jobs. And I was going to ask you, I mean, I think this is how you see him, where Steve Jobs was sort of known for like, I want this created. He had enough to know it was possible, but then most people would say you can't do that, and they'd get fired until he got what he wanted. And it was people like Woz and other engineers who made it happen. But it was Jobs who said, no, I want that, and I want you to make it. I don't care how hard it is. Like, you make it happen. And you sort of like get the feeling Elon's a little bit like that. Like, he's not going to go do that work, but he's going to say, I want this, and you have to make it work with, I don't know, you can say Falcon Wing Doors, Cybertruck, full self-driving. Do you see him like that? Like, sort of, he's got some kind of engineering background, but it's the people like JB Straubel and the top engineers who actually make Tesla.
I think it's a combination of both. I think Elon is, he's an engineer. Let's not take that away from him, right? That's not what I'm trying to do. I think he has enough engineering and quite a bit more engineering knowledge, I think, than Steve Jobs had when it came to coding. I don't know that Jobs did a whole lot of that.
And if you also take into account like rocket ships, where
sure.
he's apparently very good high level.
Yeah, I think he's very good at seeing that stuff and being an engineer and painting the broad strokes. And I think he is the type of brilliant engineer and designer who can get a concept 85% of the way there, maybe 90, based on the broad strokes. And then when you leave it to the rest of when you leave it to the part that says, man, wouldn't this be a great design if it could work this way? Yes, genius, great. But there's a different kind of genius and a different kind of skill in getting it from that lift to of concept and proof of concept into something that is production ready, that is bulletproof, that can work every day. And if you're a guy like Elon, and I say this based entirely on what I know of him, I don't know him personally, but when you're a guy like Elon, it's very easy to say, well, I did 90% of the work. It's like, no. You came up with the idea of the big idea and the broad strokes of what that was going to look like. But there's a tremendous amount of blood, sweat, and tears in taking those principles and figuring out where each nut and bolt goes. it's Frank Lloyd Wright versus the guy who actually built Falling Water, right? And I think that we give a lot of credit to the guys who do the pencil sketches and have the big concepts, and not enough credit to the guys who are in there like actually doing the detailing and the finishing work. So I think to me it's just a matter of perspective. I feel like there's an underappreciation primarily in the media, and also I think in the investment world, to say like, yeah, these little guys making it possible, yeah, they're not really that important. The important thing is the engineer at the top who understands and can give guidance. And I think that's how Elon would frame that. I think he would say, I give them guidance, I tell them to go down this path. And it's like, yeah, okay, but that's not actually the work. If you take away those guys that are actually doing that 10% of the work, none of this actually happens.
Yeah, and he's thanked the team profusely many times, but he's always the one
100%.
in the center of the stage. I mean, he's put the the other guys on stage for the shareholder meetings now, but he's still like he's there, like center of of attention of stage, and they're always pushing like the cutting edge of technology. That's like Elon's focus. That's where he wants Tesla to be, and what I see the BYD CEO and chairman is like he's almost invisible. He's done so much, but he's like he's never like he's never the superstar. Like he's not the
Yeah.
guy. He's built it from scratch, basically. I mean, he's like ridiculous, story. But what is it like? How much does anyone know about him? He doesn't really talk much. He's not outgoing, but he's just like, okay, this makes sense. Let's do it this way. And then the way he scaled up the company, and they produce semiconductors. They started out producing batteries, and then got into auto business producing normal cars. They've made the full switch to plug-in vehicles, but not to full electrics yet. But it's like he's just sort of progressed the company in a very sensible, practical way that almost seems impossible, like the way he's scaled up. But it's and so quietly. But it's like I feel like he's very humble, and he takes advice. I feel like he takes advice from experts in different realms for how to do something, and then they just do it like at a really efficient way, in a really efficient way, and they just bust their way through the markets. But I think he's a bit of a mystery, a fascinating guy. But we can move on. So Volkswagen plans a $35,000 electric vehicle for America. They have a production problem in Germany with lack of motors, lack of motor supply. What do you think about this news from Volkswagen?
I mean, it's exciting that we're going to have more vehicles in the market, right? And it's exciting that we're going to have a Passat, what I consider to be a Passat priced mainstream EV in the US. And again, the ID7 is a really good example of this, but that's an expensive vehicle. And I don't know what a $35,000 Volkswagen EV is going to look like, especially when you consider that we already have a $35,000 EV in the form of, once you apply all the all the rebates and incentives, in the form of a Model 3. So I don't really understand what Volkswagen is trying to accomplish with this. I don't think 35,000 is inexpensive enough to get a lot of hype generated. It just seems a little. I think if you were, and I hate to pick on the baby boomers, but I think if you're a baby boomer and you still think Teslas are $100,000 vehicles, reading about Volkswagen doing a $35,000 EV is going to get your juices flowing. But I think if you're on the front lines and you understand that, like, man, a year and a half ago, you could have bought a Nissan Leaf for $25,000. Like, what is the innovation here? What is the excitement here? And I think if anything else, and I hate to read this cynically, but I think what you really need to look at here is the fact that I think Volkswagen is having a harder time moving up market than they thought they were going to. I think that the idea that, well, people are going to pay more for electric, yeah, maybe they do when it says Tesla on the hood. When it says Volkswagen on the hood, at least Americans haven't figured out that that's a premium brand yet, and maybe never will, because they've been playing this game since the 90s.
Yeah, interesting. Or Audi on the hood. Audi's doing pretty well.
Oh, sure.
I think it's exciting to have more cheaper options on the market, but one thing that comes to mind is like the ID4 should be a $35,000 vehicle, or the ID3 should come to the US as one. Another thought is the Model 3 is already a $35,000 vehicle. So like, I don't know, where's the place? Like, how is it gonna be $35,000 and as good as a Model 3 if it's not the ID4? You know, so
Yeah,
it's like,
doesn't make a ton of sense.
you know, so it's a little bit concerning. Like, but like you said, maybe a lot of people, their ears would perk up to be like, oh, a $35,000 EV, I've been waiting for one. They will. There's also, of course, the Bolt. I thought you would talk about that, which is cheaper, but
It's discontinued.
well, it's supposed to be coming back. But anyway,
We'll
it's
see.
still the Bolt, so we'll just drop it. So yeah, I don't know, but this looks beautiful. The ID7. It was too bad that wouldn't be the $35,000 EV, because then I would be all about it. We'd be very excited. But that is
We'd be
cool.
very excited. That's exactly it.
So moving from Volkswagen to Volvo Group, you wanted to add this one to the list. I wasn't sure because I was like, well, what is there to say about this? They bought a bus and battery manufacturer that couldn't stay afloat. But you had some interesting thought. You had some really interesting thoughts on it. So let's.
Well, we need to separate the fact that Volvo Group is not Volvo Cars. Volvo Group makes trucks, they make marine engines, they make heavy equipment, they make excavators and articulated haulers and, you know, all kinds of track loaders and things like that. This is big, large stuff. So the other aspect of this is Volvo's BESS systems, battery energy storage, backup energy storage systems. And that is stuff that goes into manufacturing plants. It goes on these marine vehicles, and I mean like heavy duty transport ships that are moving thousands of containers across the ocean. These are large, large things. And the purchase of Proterra is interesting because a lot of people are looking at this and they're kind of overlooking it, I think, in my opinion, and saying, well, this isn't going to move the needle one way or another. The reason that Proterra doesn't seem to have been able to make it on its own has been that Proterra seemed to be going after multiple different avenues, trying to get their battery manufacturing technology off the ground. It seems like they have some really good IP. It seems like they were not able, with their small scale, to economize and get reliable sourcing for materials and things like that. Volvo has all of that. Volvo has supply lines. Volvo has existing relationships with sourcing. Volvo has all the technology and the blockchain systems in place to establish the provenance of all of their rare earth minerals. They have initiatives in place for closed loop manufacturing where they can take the used batteries out of the second life systems and put them back in. So they have what Proterra needed from the beginning, which is all of this stuff to come in so that they can start making batteries. And now they also have an application that they can develop stuff to work with the Proterra battery. The technology might be very good, the chemistry might be very good, but ultimately they had a platform that somebody else needed to say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to choose your batteries. We're going to develop a product for, you know, AA batteries, and you guys are making AAA, whatever it is. So now Proterra doesn't have to sell Volvo on this idea of using their stuff. Volvo can now begin developing BESS systems, which don't have an existing architecture. They can start developing more over-the-road stuff, semi stuff, off-road stuff around this IP for future stuff. They don't have to build it out. They don't have to build a battery to fit an existing infrastructure. In other words, manufacturing infrastructure. They can design the product for the battery at the same time that they're designing the battery, which is the kind of vertical integration that Tesla enjoys. This is going to start giving them that kind of flexibility in the heavy equipment space.
Yeah, those are really interesting points and takes. Yeah, I mean, I guess to provide some history, I mean, Proterra was just an electric bus company for years, and then it started producing batteries and for others, and becoming more than that, I think, because it just struggled to find enough business in the electric bus space. It was competing with BYD and then established bus brands like New
and Volvo.
Yeah, and I think it just struggled to get profitable with that model, so it went into the battery space more. And with on Volvo's end, it's just like, well, what are they buying it for? Is it the buses, the batteries? And because Volvo also produces buses already and is selling them, and it's a big player in Europe. And I'm thinking, like, is it maybe it's trying to get into the U.S. market quicker with Proterra's infrastructure and even brand and whatever connections, or is it really just cares about the battery tech that you talk about? Like, and it's like, well, we could use this and we could build buses and trucks and everything around it. So let's just go ahead and buy them. They're desperate. Good deal, fire sale, and maybe that's what's going on. Because I mean, Proterra filed for bankruptcy, so this is definitely a good deal for Volvo Group. They're like, oh, we can get some good stuff here on the cheap. But how they use it, I don't know. I mean, are they gonna build Proterra like buses, or are they gonna just say, oh, we don't really care about that, we've got our own electric buses, but we'll take your battery manufacturing equipment? I don't know, but it is an interesting move, and I hope that it's a sign that Volvo Group will be in North America quicker at a high scale with electric trucks and buses and everything, and that it'll do what you said, which makes a lot of sense. So it's a great idea.
Yeah, there's a list of patents that Proterra owns, US patents, that are primarily focused at charging controllers and temperature management and how fleets can effectively monitor charging and locate vehicles within a charging network that I think are going to have value. They have a patent from 2021, filed in 2017, issued in 2021, about adjusting charger current based on battery chemistry, where you can plug in the charger and it will be able to figure out what's going on there on the battery side. So there's a number of patents here, 5 pages of patents, and each one of them has like a real short one or two line description. But there's a lot of patents here that Volvo is going to have access to. And honestly, at the price they paid, 210 million, which includes all the assets of the company, all the manufacturing hardware, facilities, things like that, I think this is going to be I think this is a good deal for them.
Yeah. So I put these next to each other because of the Volvo Polestar link, but actually there's not really a link, because Volvo Group is separate from Volvo Cars. Volvo Group is the original Swedish company we think of. Volvo Cars is owned by Geely, a Chinese company now, which also owns Polestar. So there's really no link here, just historical.
There's no connection at all. There is though, because Geely bought a large piece of Daimler, and then of course Daimler then merged with the Daimler Trucks, then is now doing a joint venture with Volvo Trucks. So they're reuniting the clans.
Give it to Joe to make a connection. This is good.
I'm
Very
trying to
good.
help, brother.
This is good. But there is some interesting Polestar news. They've got a V2G, vehicle to grid charging program underway. They've also cut their sales projections, but yeah, we haven't talked about this. I don't know if you have some thoughts on the V2G program from Polestar, or if we'll just
I
note
think
it
this
and
is
move
a
on.
really critical step, right? Because the idea of using electric vehicles not as a drain on the grid, but to support the grid, is really critical when it comes to overcoming one of the major objections against EVs in terms of wide mainstream adoption and widespread adoption. There are so many people who have no idea what the grid is or how it works, who love to talk about the grid cannot take EVs all plugged into it at once. Anybody who tells you that has no conception of what the grid is, how it works, or why this doesn't make any sense. But once we have V2G capability and we have vehicles that can act as a backup to the grid, the more EVs we have out there, the stronger the grid becomes. So to see this put front and center, to illuminate this for everybody, is great stuff. And this is like anything else. 5-6 years from now, this won't be an issue. Like the conversation used to be about range anxiety. You don't hear that too much anymore because these cars are now, 300-mile range is a pretty common thing. They used to talk about sitting there for hours charging the vehicle. You don't hear that much anymore because now the charging is happening in 15 to 20 minutes. Now you're talking about the grid.
And I
Soon you're
think,
not going to hear that anymore because the grid is going to be helped by EVs. So these guys are just going to have to make up some other new nonsense to complain about.
yeah, and on the range front, I think people also, as EVs have become more popular and they've hit more normal mainstream buyers, they've realized, oh, you don't have to go to a station to charge every time. You charge at home, and it's easy. It's a whole different process. Speaking of batteries, you recently interviewed the CEO of RecycLiCo.
Yeah,
it's a great
this guy
company.
is so smart, man. And like, it's really hard to take the kind of stuff that Zarko says and distill that into an article, right? And this is just a quick introduction into the longer conversation. But, he talks about the differences between recyclers. We talk about this a lot here on Clean Tech, or rather here on EV Obsession, about the need for more differentiation at the top. So this is a little bit more along the same line where we have a number of different companies and facilities that are doing different things and calling themselves, EV battery recyclers or battery recyclers. Some of them are basically just shredding the raw materials. They're using high-speed magnets and things like that to separate some of the raw materials. Others are, effectively boiling everything down to black mass. They're churning it down into black mass, and then that black mass is the cathode and anode materials. And then they're shipping that out to someone else to make something of it. And so these are not really recycling facilities. These are all steps in the process of recycling. And what RecycLiCo is doing is really different. They're taking all of this material, all of this stuff that they're getting primarily not from EVs, but from urban mining and other areas. And they're able to extract virtually 100% of this valuable black mass. And by adding and subtracting different, or rather by adding different chemicals to the mix, because it's not a subtractive process, they can change that chemistry to meet the needs of the buyer. And they can do this all in one relatively small footprint. So what they're doing is, instead of saying, look, all this stuff is going to come back to us, we're then going to process it, shred it, make it to the order of the customer, and then send it back out to them. They're effectively putting these little recycling units as attachments into manufacturing facilities. So if you're manufacturing a battery for, for Tesla or for Volvo Group, your Proterra, the vision is to have this on site so that you can process that, make it into the stuff that you're using now, and put it right back into the assembly line. And what they're finding through independent testing is that these recycled materials, they're not 90% as good or 95% as good. They are equal in performance to the batteries and cathodes that are made from virgin materials. So we're really getting close to that promise that has been there for the last couple of years of getting to that 100% recyclability, that once you extract these minerals from the ground and put them into a battery, they never have to go back into the ground again. And Zarko made a really great comment about this. We were talking about EV batteries going into landfills. That's another one that you see all the time on Facebook and wherever the clueless people roam, is, well, these batteries are going to end up in landfills. He made a really solid point. It's a 1,500-pound battery that's worth $25,000. Nobody's taking this out of the car and dumping it in a landfill. That's just not how this works.
Yeah.
It's like nobody's doing that. And he's absolutely right. Nobody with any sense at all, with any concept at all, thinks that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's dumb. Well, if you want to really get into the tempeh and potatoes of it, there's a 48-minute and 44-second podcast there with Joe interviewing the CEO of RecycLiCo. So check that out on Clean Tech Talk. You also have, look at this, we're like a Joe Boris special today.
Well, we're talking about all my friends today. I'm really excited about it.
So we got a Chargeway update. You absolutely love Chargeway. You're always funny. You're like apologetic. It's like, I would push this so hard if I wasn't friends with the founder. And I was like, just push it. If you believe in it, push it, like evangelize.
Well, here's the thing.
But
here's the thing about Chargeway. There's a couple of different ways to use it. But if you look at that map right there, front and center, where it says, you've got the charging station map right there. You're in an unfamiliar territory. You open up the app and you look at it. And for someone who is not super familiar with EV charging, you don't have to know levels. You don't have to know how much charging juice is there. You can see right there on the center thing, the EV Go in the upper right where it says Tesla, you can see that it says if you plug into this charger, you will charge in 40 minutes. If you plug into this charger, it'll be 25 minutes. And like, that's what I want to know. I want to be able to make my decision of where I charge and where is the charger, how long is it going to take me, and I'll make my decision to go to one or the other.
But
You
what
can
if I want
see,
to know seconds instead?
I
Does it
don't think it gives
support
you
that?
that.
Okay.
No. But I think that's fair. And I also like this. It has live station data at the port. So it'll tell you like, hey, there's 4 different charging ports here. 2 of them are 350 kilowatt, 2 of them are 150. The 2 350 kilowatt hour ones are currently occupied. This one is not. And when you're doing a route planning and you're on a road trip, it's updating that route live with stations that are available and unavailable. So if you're about to pass one and the one ahead of it goes offline, it'll then adjust and give you a notification. Hey, you got to go to this one because the plan has changed, which I just think is huge. And I absolutely think that, if you did a side-by-side comparison of route planning with just about any app versus Chargeway, at least the apps that I've seen, I think Chargeway is a superior app. There's other good ones out there, but like,
And
this is the kind of thing that you can just say, look, if you've got somebody who's renting an EV for the first time and they're at a charging station trying to figure it out and they don't understand, the rental company didn't tell them anything, just tell them, dude, download Chargeway. It'll get you 75% of the way there. Where I don't think you can really say that of a lot of other ones.
problem is they still need an account to charge at these different networks. That's still
That's
the
the big
problem.
issue. Yeah, that's the bigger issue.
In Europe, you had the plug surfing, which was great because it would link a lot and make it easy. But I mean, you have it. But so you call this their biggest update yet. So what is new? What is with the latest update? What makes it so big?
Well, that's a good point. So when you look at this, previously you just had the map that would tell you where the charging stations were and what speed they were, right? Because Chargeway doesn't use level 1, level 2, and then DC fast charging. They differentiate different levels of DC fast charging. And I think that that's important because I think a lot of people don't understand 300 kilowatt, 250 kilowatt. They can't figure all that out. I think level 5, level 6, I think makes a lot more sense for the average person. And the trip planning before
it also doesn't help if it just says level 3 and you're talking about 50 kilowatt versus 250 kilowatt. Like that's like level 3 doesn't
well,
tell
and
you
this
much.
is why you need that differentiation at the top, right? Like we can't just keep. Now we have 500 kilowatt charging in China. We're gonna have megawatt charging. What are you gonna call all of that level 3? That doesn't make a ton of sense. So I think that that's critically important. But difference number one is you have in that station finder, you have that individualized that at this port you're going to get this much time, at this port you're going to get that much time. You're not just going to show up and every charging port is going to be at the same speed at a charging station. That's a very critical thing. Another thing is if you're in a Chevy Bolt that can only charge up to level 4, it's going to tell you, we recommend you go to this charging. It's like, look for this one, look for Phoenicia, or look for Jennifer, the charge port that is going to be matched to your speed, and leave the ultra high speed charging for people who can take advantage of it. So I think that's a big update. I think that's something that's just going to help the EV experience for everybody, not just the person with the app. And I think the other fundamental thing is when you're doing a road trip, it doesn't ask you a ton of questions. It just asks you where you're going to go, and then what kind of vehicle you're in, how fast you're going to drive, and what's the weather like. And from there, it does all the heavy lifting. You don't have to say, man, it's only 10 degrees out. I wonder how that's going to affect my range. It's going to handle all that for you. And then it's going to tell you when you get to this charging station, it's going to be 20 minutes. When you get to this charging station, it's going to be 15 minutes. When you get to this one, it's going to be 40. And it's going to tell you the best stops to make. It's not going to ask you a whole bunch of questions and have you make a whole bunch of decisions. It just makes it easy. And it's kind of hard to conceptualize I'd been familiar with Chargeway because we wrote about it in 2018, a year or two before I ever met Matt Teskey, who's the founder. And I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool. I kind of get it. It's good. But it's not until you like really experience it side by side and you do a road trip planning with like PlugShare, or like, to me, the worst one is ChargePoint's native app. You're sitting there trying to figure this out and you're like, man, this is terrible. And if you've ever owned or driven a Tesla, you know it's actually quite easy to plan a road trip from your Tesla. You can see the charging.
I mean, the Tesla system is as simple as it gets. Like we did a road trip from Poland to Paris, like
the best
30 hours.
way.
I put in
exactly
the hostel in Paris where we were staying, and I didn't have to think again. We pulled over where it told us to pull over and charge. If we charged longer than expected, which was often the case because we were using the bathroom, getting food, then it would reroute us to a different charging station next further along instead of a closer one. So it's as easy as it gets, and it seems like Chargeway sort of does that for non-Teslas.
That's a really great way of looking at it. It brings the Tesla charging experience to non-Tesla EVs.
Yeah, and I just love that they decided to name this yellow Kia EV6 GT Bumblebee. That's very cool.
That's nice. Well, it's funny because there's a screenshot of that I wanted him to use, because I have the Chargeway app. This is the one that I use whenever I'm test driving vehicles or anything, especially something I'm unfamiliar with. And you know, I have the different vehicles in there that I have, and I have my my XC90 T8, even though I never plug it in when I'm on the road because it's a little tiny battery. But I have the Swedish Sexy Time.
Well,
that's nice.
What do you mean?
Well,
that's the name. Oh yeah.
Well, so because this is actually critical.
Okay, go ahead.
This is critical because if you have a fleet, like if you're trying to manage a municipal fleet of like 50 vehicles, you can name each one of them and then very quickly cycle through. Like if you have a dealership, you can have the stock number in there and you can tell the porter, okay, we got to take 2714 to get charged. It's a Nissan Leaf. There's a high-speed charger at this Walgreens. Go there.
The poor Leaf doesn't get a proper name. Poor Leaf just gets a number. Well, yeah. Well, I'm curious, how long does it take to add a vehicle? And do you see, since you've used it for a lot of different EVs, do you see much difference, or is basically the same across all the EVs you've used it with?
I mean, you don't see any difference in the way that it works.
I mean, yeah,
but you see a big difference in the route planning for sure.
Yeah, so you notice big differences in what different EVs, because I imagine you take them on similar areas when you're testing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do trips to Ohio, I'll do trips to Springfield, I'll do trips to northern Wisconsin in them, especially if I have a tester that has decent range. I'll do that. And yeah, it is pretty similar. You'll see different stops.
I guess the question too, like say I'm thinking about buying an EV6, Kia EV6, or I don't want to say Hyundai Ioniq 5 because, well, just say Hyundai Ioniq 5. And I'm like, well, what if I wanted it to go to Washington, D.C. or Orlando? I could put them in the Chargeway app before buying it and see what the different trips would be like, right?
Exactly. And this is why the National Auto Dealer Association, the NADA, actually selected Chargeway as their kind of tool to educate dealers and train dealers in how to talk about EVs and how to sell EVs, because the whole point is to help customers figure out how the vehicle they're about to buy is going to fit into their life. Yeah. Whether it's a pickup truck running a diesel engine, whether it's a delivery van on compressed natural gas, doesn't matter what it is. You're trying to make this thing fit into your life. And if you can't visualize that, if you can't quickly see what's in your area, if you can't quickly understand how am I going to get this thing to grandma's house for Thanksgiving, you can't honestly say that it's going to fit your life. And the idea being, this makes it so much easier to speak language of the customers who may not know that much about EVs. And it also eliminates the guesswork. There is nothing worse than a well-meaning salesperson when someone asks them, how long does it take to plug in their car? And the guy says, well, I have one of these. It just takes me 10 seconds. When I get home, I pop it open, I plug it in, and then I walk inside. And when I get out in the morning, my car is full. That's my line, Joe. That's my line.
I
hate it. I
love that line.
Oh, it's a
I love
terrible
it.
line.
I mean, of
Because
course, I
if you,
got it from others, but I was like, oh, this is the
yeah,
best.
oh, it's a terrible line though, because
Uh,
if you are sincerely curious, you're a sincerely curious person trying to understand how this is going to fit into your life, it doesn't answer the question that's being
Well,
asked.
it
And
does
you can
for
argue
95% of driving, but if you want for a road trip,
100%.
be like, oh, well, how does it work on a road trip? Okay, well, then
But for the 40% of Americans that don't have a garage, it doesn't answer their question.
oh yeah, that too. But I also I didn't have one for a long. I didn't have a charging at home for a long time, and I used to explain where I would charge and how. So I got used to that, and I got tired of it. So then once I could, but I don't
Yeah.
really talk to
Well,
people
my
anymore.
answer
I
was
avoid
always, you don't,
human
yeah,
interaction. But
100%.
I will say, like most members of, or many members, I don't know, I haven't seen research on it, of the human species, I'm very attracted to good design. And one thing I love about Chargeway is just it's a very appealing, very nice design here on the app, and it's just like it makes you want to use it. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't need to, but I just want to go back on the app because it's sort of really
You
cool
should download it and try it out and
for the
see what you think.
Tesla. Yeah.
Yeah, put it in a Tesla. It supports Tesla.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Hi, my name is Scott Cooney. I started Clean Technica to promote clean energy and other sustainable alternatives, and for 13 years we've been moving markets. If we had a nickel for every time someone told us they bought their first EV, solar, e-bike, or fill in the blank clean energy solution, we'd be a cable TV channel by now. But we don't get those nickels. So unfortunately, we could use your help to reach a few more people. If just 1% of our audience chipped in a few bucks a month, we could hire dozens of great journalists and promote all sorts of climate solutions. It's easy. Just go to cleantechnica.com/support and sign up with a credit card in seconds. Cancel anytime. But we'll be sending out some cool perks too, so I think you'll want to stick around. With your support, we'll keep leading the charge. Thank you so much.